Hi, welcome to Constitutional Chats, hosted by me, Janine Turner,
and Kathy Gillespie,
with students
Dakari Chapman
and me, Tova Kaplan.
Join us as we discuss hot topic issues with constitutional experts. It's sponsored by Constituting America.
Welcome to Constitutional Chats, or shall I say, Constituting America's Constitutional Chats. We're thrilled that you're with us today. Come on in. We have a great guest, Tony Williams, back by popular demand, and we're going to be talking about natural law. It's our third segment in a series of 4 about natural law. Really important for all of us to know because it's not taught very often anymore. So come on in. We'd love to know how old you are. If you're middle school, high school, college, if you're a teacher, parent, grandparent, if you're just checking it out, a donor, a friend, let us know. Scroll up and down, click on that. And then Aubrey, our extraordinary director of media, is going to tell us, just give us an idea. The reason we do this is so that we can gear our dialogue toward the proper demographic. Yes. Took me a year to figure out how to put that to words, but gear our dialogue toward the proper demographic. All righty. And I'll just introduce Aubrey for a second while she's calculating. Aubrey is our team, as I said, media director. She's responsible for all of our fabulous technology. And she's a middle of 7 children, which we just think is fantastic. Somehow that's just really noteworthy. Whoever, I don't know if it's you, Aubrey, like to say that, or Kathy Gillespie thought that was really great, but nevertheless, we always brag about it. She's a student at Brigham Young University and aspires to be an athlete. And she's this year's winner of our contest, We the Future Best College STEM winner. So Aubrey, say hello. And I just also have to say, Aubrey, I love your enthusiasm. So it's a terrific looking at your face throughout the entire show. Okay, so hi.
Yes, thanks for that, Jenny. Excited to be here. So really quick, I'll just share the poll results. So we have 13% middle and high school students, 4% college students, 4% teachers, 25% parents or grandparents with children, 4% donors, 21% friends, and 29% fans. And we're excited for all of you to be here today.
Great. Yes, we are. Thank you, Aubrey. All right. So once again, I'm Janine Turner, founder and co-president of Constituting America. Kathy Gillespie is co-president. She's not with us today. So Kathy is extraordinary. It's like a bird has a left wing and a right wing. We both need to fly, but our sponsors are our donors to the foundation are the wind beneath the wings. We would just be birds walking around the ground, not able to fly if it were not for you, the donors. And the special donor, the special sponsor of today's show is, guess who? It is my mother, Janice Gant. And I guess we don't have a picture to put up of my mom, do we? Me. We should get one up. I'll try to send you one, Aubrey, so we can brag on my mom by the end of the show at least. But my mother is my mother, and I just wouldn't be the person I am without my mother, like most mothers. But my mother is extraordinary, and she was one of our first donors to Constituting America. She's on the board. She's been a board member for 11 years of Constituting America, and she's always the one with the business sense that's no nonsense when she's on those calls. My mom makes sure things are done correctly. But Mom, we're thrilled. Thank you for all your contributions and all the donations over the years, and for you're looking after our foundation on the board, and we appreciate it, appreciate you, and love you. And hi, Mom. All right. So now I'm going to introduce, Kathy's not with us today. I'm going to introduce our fabulous panel of co-hosts. And first is Tova Love Kaplan. And Tova Love Kaplan is one of the most extraordinary young persons you will ever encounter. She speaks many languages. When you get on camera, Tova, you can tell us all the languages. I'm very jealous. You know, you're so busy in your junior year of high school, but I want to call you and just speak French and learn how to speak French, one of your many languages. You will see Tova someday as a Secretary of State or the president if she wants to be, or the our ambassador to the UN. She's very interested in international relations. She's also a 3-time winner of Constituting America's contest, both creative, left brain, right brain, STEM, entrepreneur, PSA. And she is the National Youth Director for Constituting America. So Tova, which I have to say, I say it every time, you run that youth advisory board like a CEO of a top 100 company. So welcome, Tova.
Well, merci beaucoup. Shukran. Toda roba. Gracias. I'm learning, to answer your question, Latin, Arabic, French, and Hebrew right now. So I love studying it and everything. Definitely a wide variety, but I enjoy it. And I'm so glad to be here as always. It makes my Tuesdays so much better, and is a great break from online school. And I'm just can't believe we've been doing this for more than a year. And thank you to all our supporters, those who've been with us from the beginning and those who are, maybe just joining us today. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you, Tova. When you speak French, aren't you supposed to say enchanté or something like that? You're supposed to say they're enchanted. It's something nice after you say hello. Bonjour, enchanté. How do you say that? Whatever. I can. Je parle français un petit peu. Okay, Julian Jordan. Julian Jordan, you're on. Yeah, two new members of our team, Julian Jordan Gilbert. And I think we have a picture of them, don't we? There we go. Julian Jordan Gilbert are also winners of our contest, and they've starred in our documentaries and so incredibly impressive. We're thrilled. I warned our guests today, be careful. They have really intuitive, sharp questions. Jewel Gilbert is executive producer, and his brother, Jordan Gilbert, is operations director for Sing for America, a family-based company that the brothers co-founded. See, we learned the Constitution in a very creative way around here. Sing for America seeks to show the art of truth and light, capital T, capital L, through live performance. Both are proud former We the People contest winners. Sing for America is an actor-run theater company which specializes in semi-professional musicals, private training in the arts, school drama solutions, and public entertainment events, all while revealing a colorblind world on stage. Jewel and Jordan are graduates of Moravian College, where they earned a BA in musical performance and dramatic production. Welcome. We're so thrilled you're with us today, Jewel and Jordan.
Really glad to be here. And really looking forward to grilling Tony a little bit about our founding fathers and natural law.
There you go. He's the man to do it. He's writing a book on the founding fathers. Okay, Jeanette is filling in for Kathy today. Jeanette Cunningham, extraordinary person, heart of gold. She's a former elementary school teacher, former PTA president, which is saying a lot, and your operations director of Constituting America. You also speak with me. She's one of our speakers. We do the speeches together, or if we have 5 a day, we ping pong back and forth. And so all these speeches we do about the United States Constitution in the schools or civic areas, and also we have one on how to have a civic conversation, which is very popular right now. But Jeanette, where would we be with Jeanette? Jeanette's been with our foundation from day one as well, and welcome, Jeanette. This will be fun to co-host with you today.
Oh, thank you so much, Janine. It's been quite a ride. We've been together for close to 10 years now. I'm going to brag on Janine a little bit. Everyone knows Janine is famous for her role as Maggie O'Connell and all that she does here at Constituting America. But Janine goes above and beyond sharing her gifts and talents. I have a daughter that's a young actress up in New York, and Janine was filming a show 2 summers ago when she took my daughter with her to Nashville while Janine was working on the set. And my daughter had an opportunity of a lifetime to spend 2 weeks with Janine on set, meeting actors, meeting producers, hanging out with Janine. And my daughter recently filmed a show for HBO. And when she got to the set and was working with some of the actors, they were also impressed with the things that she knew. And she said, well, the only reason I know this is because my mom's friend, Janine Turner, took me with her. And she said, my daughter has a BFA, in theater, and she also studied at the University of Edinburgh. And she said the 2 weeks I spent with Janine live on set was invaluable. And so Janine is just, she gives so much of herself, not just to Constituting America, but to other people that she meets throughout her life. I just wanted an opportunity to publicly thank you for sharing and giving another young actor an opportunity that a lot of people would only dream of. So I wanted to thank you for that personally.
Thank you, Jeanette. That's
You're
so nice to
welcome.
hear. Yeah, I live alone on 300 acres, so I don't get to hear a lot of like things. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Unless it's from the bird, from a cow, you know, or my aged longhorn. My aged longhorn loves me a lot because I give her really good food. Okay, Tony Williams. Oh, we are a serious show, I promise. It's going to get really good. All right, Tony Williams is our special guest today. And let me brag about him. He's an accomplished scholar, author, and educator. And he loves sharing his passion for the ideas and documents of the American founding with teachers across the country, while also writing history and civics curricula for the Institute. What institute? You'll have to tell us what institute, or is it just called the Institute?
The Bill of Rights Institute. Yep.
Oh, well, it just says the Institute. Okay. The Bill of Rights Institute in 2014. Tony taught at the middle school and high school level for 15 years. And he's the author of 5 books on early American history. The most recently was Stephen F. Knott, Washington and Hamilton, the alliance, not allowance, that forged America. Tony is currently writing a book on the Declaration of Independence. You'll have to tell us when that's going to be out, Tony. Tony lectures around the country on C-SPAN, Book TV, Fox News, Legends and Lies, The Patriots, the U.S. State Department, Revolutionary War battle sites, Colonial Williamsburg, the Virginia Festival of the Book. That sounds interesting. And several universities. Tony is also one of the most generous contributors to our 90-day study, and you are, Tony. You've written over 90 essays, or over 80, for 11 of our 90-day studies since 2010. So thank you so much, Tony, and welcome to our show. And we are talking about natural law because no one talks about it anymore, and it's really not taught in law school anymore. And that's why so many people are forgetting that the government isn't the be all and end all. It's the government's supposed to, help us in a kind of they're supposed to stay out of the way and not run our lives. So we don't want the government to be the power. And that's not what our founders believed. They believed there was another type of power. And Tony, you're going to talk to us all about that, natural law and the founding fathers, which is our segment today.
Right. Well, Jenny, thank you so much for having me on. Hello to all my fellow panelists, all the viewers out there. And yes, it's been a great collaboration over these past 10, 11 years with Constituting America. So I really enjoyed writing all those essays and my other appearances. Well, it's a shame as you queued it up with the, misunderstanding about natural law today, or I should say the silence on natural law, because, the founders really all believed, even though they were from different backgrounds and had different religious beliefs and so forth, they really all did embrace the idea of a natural law. And I think it's important maybe to just take a few seconds and define what natural law is. I know you've had a few episodes up till now, but much like the scientific thinkers of the scientific revolution who believed that the universe was, constructed of various natural laws, like the laws of motion and gravity and all those Newtonian ideas, the founders and other thinkers throughout history have believed that, the universe and our world, humanity is also shaped by natural laws, by a moral order to the universe, and that this moral order sort of, binds us together and, teaches us right from wrong, good from evil, and measures the justice or injustice of our actions. And the founders really got this from a lot of different sources, right? As I think a lot of the essays in your excellent series right now are pointing out, and I did in my essay as well. One strain was the ancients, such as Aristotle and Cicero. They were pre-Christian and were not Judaic, but they had an idea of natural law, that there is a right and a wrong, that there is justice and injustice in the world, that there's good and evil. And the Christians did as well. Most of the early Americans were Protestant Christians of many various denominations, and they embrace natural law ideas as well did Catholics, and also Jewish Americans as well. From the Jewish tradition, we get a very strong idea of a covenant theology, and this influences the Puritans as well. Covenant theology is basically saying that Americans see themselves as a new chosen people, as a new Israel, and that they have obligations to fulfill, to be virtuous and to be good and to follow God's will. And if they do, they'll be rewarded. And if they don't, they'll be punished and set right. They also get the ideas of natural law from the Enlightenment tradition, the ideas of John Locke and many other Enlightenment thinkers, scientific revolutionary thinkers. And this is very strong. And this is where, it takes on a secular dimension as well. But whether it's secular, whether it's more religiously based, there was a consensus about how all these different strains of thought really shaped the founders' thinking about natural law. Now, they weren't professors sitting around in a seminar room for graduate school, so they didn't necessarily concern themselves with, well, this strain might be a little different from this idea of natural law. They, as statesmen, as practical politicians, they reconciled these different ideas and had a basic understanding of natural law, that there was a moral order to the universe. And this moral order shaped their understanding of human nature as basically inherently flawed, but capable of virtue. Okay, so to put it in Christian terms or Jewish terms, sinful, but also capable of goodness, capable of virtue. And so taking this view of human nature, that natural law also informed the idea that we have rights. And as you said in your opening, that these rights came from God. Okay? They came from a higher source. As Jefferson says in the Declaration of Independence, they came from nature and nature's God. Okay, and so those rights have a higher authority than human institutions, than government, and they're embedded in our natures. And so since they're part of human nature, you cannot be alienated from them, right? We talk about unalienable or inalienable rights. You cannot be separated or alienated from your rights. You have them by nature, and no government nor a private person can take those away from you, okay? And so you have those rights, and the American founders, as we see in the Declaration of Independence, believed that a certain kind of government was best able to protect those rights and was most consistent with their understanding of human nature and with natural law. And that view, of course, was a natural rights republic, in which case the purpose of government, as it says in the Declaration, is the protection of those natural rights, of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so understanding their different sources of natural law, how they shape their view of human nature, and then finally shape their understanding of government is really kind of the central story of the relationship of the founders to natural law, and why this is all so important at a high level for us as Americans and our basic foundational beliefs as Americans.
Okay, and this segment, thank you, Tony, that was terrific. This segment's, we're going to focus on natural law and the founding fathers, because the first one was on, Aristotle and whatnot. But we had his essays online, by the way. His essay is part of our current study, which is fantastic, on the Declaration of Independence. And so this particular essay, if you'd like to go read it, is essay, you can't see this, is essay 7, and it's terrific. So you go to constitutingamerica.org and find the 90 and 90-day study, and you can, it's all about the Declaration of Independence. You can join it at any time, go backwards or forwards or start at the beginning, but his is essay 7, and it's really wonderful. So talk to me, before I toss it to Tova and the gang here, and talk to me about the expression of the American mind. That's what Thomas Jefferson, you talk about all the founding fathers and their perspectives of natural law. You really break it down very well. And I'll let the co-host kind of pinpoint different founding fathers. But Thomas Jefferson wrote to Henry Lee that this was the object of the Declaration of Independence, not to find new principles or new arguments never before thought of, not merely to say things which have never been said before, but to place before mankind the common sense of the subject in terms so plain and firm as to command their assent. In other words, they simplified it because it's not always that easy to read these, philosophers like John Locke. It was intended to be an expression of the American mind and to give to that expression the proper tone and spirit called for the occasion. All the authority rests then on the harmonizing sentiments of the day. And, each of us who ask questions like to bring in a certain, our certain kind of, I don't know, but I really like to focus on today, how is this? So what's the difference between the American expression of the mind then and what's happening today with the American expression of the mind today?
Right. Well, I think that what Jefferson is talking about so beautifully there with this expression of the American mind, of the harmonizing sentiments of the day, is that he's not trying to be original in writing the Declaration. He's just talking about the common sense, which is their shared belief in a moral universe, in self-government, in freedom and natural rights. Okay, and he's saying these were the harmonizing sentiments. They were in the air, right? They were in the water, you might say. They were in newspapers. They were in, these books and taught in colleges as well, but also disseminated among ordinary people, right? Through newspapers and pamphlets like Thomas Paine's Common Sense or other pamphlets by Jefferson or Hamilton. They were preached from the pulpit on Sundays. They were found in letters and speeches and so forth. So they were floating around in the air. And so even though if you hadn't read John Locke, you would, you might hear this idea of covenant theology and natural law from the pulpit, or you might, discuss it in a tavern or read it in a newspaper. I think, and it really bound together and united the American people in these basic ideas of human nature, of government, of natural rights. Today, I unfortunately, I think we're losing some of that sense, right? If people disagree over some of the basics, like, equality, what is equality? We don't live in an equal society, and we question even these basic things, or that there is no natural law, and so we just won't talk about it or won't teach it. As we, and I think this causes a divide, right? Because as Americans, I'm not sure we're always agreeing with the same basic principles anymore. We'll always disagree over policy, right? We'll always disagree over, how much government there should be, or, the economy, economic policies, that kind of thing. And that's fine. That's part of a vibrant, healthy, deliberative democracy. But I would really urge us as Americans to teach these ideals of the founding and teach the ideas that were the harmonizing sentiments of their day, so that they can better inform a healthier conversation today, so that we can have that more civil conversation. We can agree on the basics, and then, over a coffee, over dinner, we can, disagree over, some of the more specific things, but we can all unite as Americans around these basic ideas.
It seems to me there's a bit of a difference now. I think this is very prevalent, and that at the time they felt that God, or at least this natural kind of higher purpose, and their right to live that and to mirror that quality in their lives, was their independence was very important. But it seems today, I'm listening as you talk, it seems today we've lost that, and now it's what can the government do. That's why the government is the answer, instead of wait, the answer is within myself. Whether you're a religious person or not a religious person, you have the independence to find the answer within yourself, and we've become really very self-reliant on this. I would think that was, in my opinion, the biggest expression change of the American expression, or how is it the expression of the American mind, is that before it was like, we can do it, and we're God is with us, and this is and now it's like, well, what's the government going to do for me? And I think that that's a very dangerous because once the government gets so big, you end up, communist Russia, communist China, that type of thing. And I just want to make a note here, and then I want to toss it to Tova. It's interesting when you talked about the pulpit, that they talked about politics in the pulpit. Now today, that doesn't happen as much anymore, because they gave these churches their 501c3s, which mean they don't have to pay taxes and things of that nature. And with that, though, they were silenced, and so now they can't bring in both, because if they talk politics, they lose their 501c3 status. So it doesn't mean that that's the only dialogue that needs to be had in America, because, as Tova always points out, and we all know, there are people can live their lives and have religion or not religion or whatever it wants to be. However, I'm a real big believer in 2 points of view. If you're going to talk about, this topic, show both sides. And now our dialogue and the expression of the American mind is purely government oriented, because the churches have been silenced. So it's kind of interesting in that respect too, isn't it? If you give kind of a lightning round answer, then I'll move to Tova. But it's a shame, really, that back in the day, the churches were paying, all those people were paying taxes. I don't know what the situation was with the churches, but now they all just they want to keep their 501c3 status, and so we need both. We need to hear both, and we're not hearing both, which is why we're doing this.
Right. Well, Jefferson said in one of his pamphlets, the Americans were free people claiming their rights as derived from the laws of nature, not the gift of their chief magistrate, right? And we believe that rights are from government now, right? And we've acceded an awful lot to government. And we can see all this in the current debates, right? Spending trillions and trillions of dollars for, the future debt of all these young people on the panel and watching. We talk about vaccination cards and passports and so forth. The whole lockdown. All of these very problematic, and we should have a vigorous debate about it and not try to shut down, the other side.
Yeah. Well, people get so afraid with separation of church and state, which really wasn't what Jefferson was talking about anyway. He was referring to something completely different. But nevertheless, all right. Tova Love Kaplan, you're on.
Thank you. So this is really fascinating. I have a ton of questions, but I'll go through just a few. Just to make the distinction, what is natural rights versus human rights, those phrases, and then versus civil rights? So can you just talk about those distinctions and overlaps?
Right. Well, natural rights are those rights from, as I said, from the Declaration, from nature and nature's God. So they're embedded in natural law, in nature, in human nature, and they come from a higher authority, right? And they cannot be violated by government or other individuals. Yeah, I think civil rights are those rights that sort of are defined by government, right? The government defines, like, for example, who can vote, right? And we've decided that 5-year-olds cannot vote, and there are some other reasonable limitations that we place on voting. So there are reasonable civil rights that we have as members of a civil society, and then there are natural rights we get from nature. I think the idea of human rights is a little bit more made up. It's a little bit more of a 20th century, 21st century idea that, like, for example, when they were trying to put the UN together and there were so many different peoples and cultures and faiths involved, they sort of wanted to take the religious component out of it and sort of the idea of natural rights and natural law, because they weren't sure if everybody would agree with these traditions, even though the natural law tradition is universal and sort of transcends these cultures and even religions. But they just wanted to make it part of your birth as human beings. And that's fine insofar as it goes, but I think that it doesn't do justice to the idea of natural rights. I very infrequently talk about human rights when I give talks or in my books, because I think the natural rights foundation of rights is really much stronger, because it is from a higher authority and is how the founders themselves and people throughout history have understood the sources of their rights.
so human rights is like natural rights, but not believing it comes from like a divine. It's just like inherent to being human. Is that what you're saying?
Right. And there's kind of a little bit of circular logic in there, right? It's like, well, why do you have human rights? Well, because I'm human. Well, but because I have human rights. It just, I think, yeah, I think it's a little unsatisfying, and I hope people can kind of see the difference there.
Great. And then so would you say civil rights are the rights that come as a result of having a government? Like, for example, if we didn't have a government, you'd still have natural rights, but because we do have a government, that creates civil rights?
Right. Yeah, that's a really great way to put it, actually. And don't forget, we live in a republic, in a democracy. And so that, according to John Locke, when we sort of enter into civil society, we form our government. So we are the sovereign people. We are the ones who form the government, right? We give our consent to this representative government. And so, yes, it's when we form a government, but really when we come together and form that government and form civil society, inherent in that society and that Republican form of self-government is, you do have certain rights as members of that society to give your consent. And like I said, voting would be an obvious example of that.
Thank you. And then this is more of a broad kind of subjective question. I'm just interested to hear what you think, or if anyone else on the panel wants to weigh in. But, we've talked a lot about, we're moving away from what the founders wanted, or we're moving, like our philosophy is changing from what the founders originally intended. And do you think that the success of America and of our government, like inherently necessitates that we keep the same values throughout time as our founding fathers and the same philosophy, or can we still have success as a country even under the framework that they created if our ideas change over time, or philosophy?
Right. Well, yeah, no, that's a great question. It's a good hard question. But I think that certain foundational ideas should remain as part of the republic, as they've been embraced throughout the course of our history as Americans. The idea of self-government, for example, the idea that all men, all people are created equal, right? The idea that we all have the same inherent dignity and rights, and that we can govern ourselves. All these basics, right? I think should be agreed upon by Americans. We can kind of, debate the meaning of all this and all that, but I think we all love being free as Americans, free individuals, and don't want to live under a tyranny or a communist despotism or what have you. On the other hand, other things can change, and sometimes, they change for the better, such as being more inclusive in who can vote, such as women, African Americans. We can have some different, we can expand the suffrage to 18-year-olds, for example. There can be changes in society, right? There are technological changes and so forth, and lots of changing things in society, but those foundational ideals, I think, are very important because they define who we are as Americans, right? With all of our differences, with all of our wonderful differences that we have as Americans from many different lands and religious backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds, that we share some real basics in common. I think that unites us and binds us together as a people. And the wonderful thing is, it's an idea of being free and self-governing. It's very simple things. And so I think those are some of the non-negotiables, if you will, that we should really all embrace as Americans.
Really great answer.
Tony, I want to step in real quick and just clarify something you just said. And we can all do this. But giving women the right to vote, or or African Americans the right to vote, that wasn't exclusive in natural law. I mean, God would want that, right? Or the Creator, nature's law would want that. I think that was just kind of an error in human pride or something, don't you? I mean, I wouldn't really equate that these people, women and African Americans, I'm one of them, that we couldn't vote, wasn't natural law wasn't preventing that.
Right. No, those are defined by civil society. And so I'm glad that we had an expansionary, understanding of political participation and giving your consent. So it's rooted in natural rights and natural law ideas about consent and about sovereignty and about self-government. But just in terms of thinking about how things have changed, I'm glad that those natural rights concepts were expanded in our civil rights and
Yeah, I think it's natural law that has perpetuated thinking and being a better and better people, and that comes from natural law to be better human beings. And by being better human beings, we realize that everyone needs to be a part of, have their rights. And so yeah, I think if we didn't have natural law, we wouldn't be evolving as a people in a good sort of way like that. Okay, Tova, one more, and I'm gonna go to Julian and Jordan.
Sure. So is natural law more of a uniquely American idea? So was America the first country to really implement natural law into our framework? And have there been, a lot of countries after us that have followed in our example?
Yeah, that another good and tough question. I think that, as I said, the many different sources of natural law show that we were not the only ones who believed in it. We certainly didn't invent the idea of a natural law. It comes from many different traditions, some of which are many thousands of years old. But in many ways, we were the first government, the first regime that built their government on those ideas, right? On a Declaration of Independence, on that natural rights foundation. And yes, many other governments have emulated it, although not always with an exact model. But I do think America was exceptional in that way. And so the French Revolution and other governments along the way have certainly tried to emulate what America did. And I think that was part of an expanding democracy around the globe, an unfulfilled expansion, but yet nonetheless, a lot of people around the world are a lot freer because of the example of the American Revolution.
Oh, definitely. Thank you, Tova. Okay, Jewel and Jorn, you're on.
All right. So I kind of want to stay along our same line of thought here a little bit. So the founders, okay, when they were writing the Constitution, they embedded an end to slavery. But certain historians will say that they didn't do a good enough job with that. And I want to know what you think in response to that. And do you think that there was a better way? Just off the bat, do you think that there was a better way that they really could have put a quicker end to something that was so normal in society?
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, such a good question. One that we really need to confront head on, and that we shouldn't sort of sweep under the rug. The problem of slavery in America is certainly forefront, especially in this discussion of natural law and natural rights, because they were denied to so many people in a really horrific way. Let me maybe provide just kind of a brief overview of how I think this fits into our discussion. One is, many of the founders themselves, were slave owners, and yet they're declaring the rights of mankind. They're asserting this idea of self-government, all rooted upon the natural law and natural rights, and yet we're denying them themselves to people by claiming to own another person as property, and deny them those very rights of consent, of their natural rights, of their liberty, and of their right to their own labor and personhood. I think one needs to immediately look at human nature, right? They understood human nature to be flawed, and this was, a flaw. This was a contradiction that we need to try to understand. I think the first thing to realize is they knew that it violated that natural law. They knew that they were violating natural rights. They knew it was a moral evil. and that they knew that they were morally culpable in all of this. And have many, let's start with at least statements against it. You know, they thought that, you know, the slavery and the slave trade were atrocious debasements of human nature. Jefferson called the slave trade political warfare against human nature. You know, they criticized themselves, these slave owner and founders criticized slavery in the most stark kind of moral terms, arguing that it was wrong. And yet they continued to own human beings, right? Again, going back to that flawed human nature where they're putting their own self-interest above their ideals, right? And unfortunately, we all do that. But more importantly than I think just their words, right? Which are important for understanding the founders, but if they're just words, right, and not actions, then we're left, you know, upset that they didn't act out their action, their ideas. So what actions did they take on slavery? Well, they took many. I think we need to recognize that because of revolutionary principles, some Quakers, a few other people questioned slavery before the founding, before the revolution, but not many did. Most people took it for granted, as you said. After the American Revolution, after the Declaration, during the founding, many people start taking actions against slavery and the slave trade. In fact, it's one of the, not one of, it is the largest emancipation in world history up to that point. We don't normally talk about it, but somewhere upwards of about 70 to 100,000 slaves were freed as a result of the American Revolution. Many thousands ran away to the British side. You might say they were voting for natural rights with their feet, right, and claiming their freedom as men and women by running away from their masters. Another action that African Americans themselves took is to sue for their freedom, especially in New England, and they also petitioned legislatures for their freedom. And in many cases, they won that freedom. That many northern states either freed their slaves outright or gradually emancipated their slaves over the next decade or two. Okay, and that was particularly in the North. In addition, a lot of people, even in the South, particularly in the Upper South, Maryland, Virginia, and the Chesapeake region, privately manumitted or freed their slaves. And the numbers are up in the tens of thousands because those slaveholders themselves realized that their ideals, their understanding of natural law and of right and wrong were conflicted by slavery. Okay. They also banned the expansion of slavery to the Northwest Territory and then banned the slave trade for continuing into 1808, where it was ended, and it was ended by Congress and President Jefferson on the very day that it could be. And then finally, they did not recognize a property in man very purposefully in slavery in the Constitution. Okay, they avoided that term. Why? Not because they're obfuscating, but they're trying to hide slavery because they envisioned a day that it would die, as Lincoln said, a natural death, that they would put it on the road to ultimate extinction by restricting it to a very narrow area in the South. And, slavery was really a matter of positive law, of state law in the South, not of natural law. And you will see in the founding, no one that I've ever found defended slavery on religious and moral grounds. Okay, they said it was a part of history, every culture had it, it's in our self-interest to keep slaves, but nobody defended the morality of slavery. That became later, okay? John Calhoun, some other people who advocated the quote unquote positive good of slavery actually thought it was good for the slave and the slave owner. But people were not making that claim during the founding. And yet, having said all of that, on the other hand, slavery endured, right? And it spread to especially the Southwest.
Hey,
Yeah.
Tony, Jordan have to ask some more questions and then I have to get to the listeners. So
okay,
we might need a lightning round. fascinating. It's fascinating, but I'm the
I learned a lot.
producer
Thank you,
on
Tony.
Time clock.
Okay,
You're on-
sure.
Okay.
She's got the hard job. Thanks,
I got the
Janine.
heart. I'm the producer.
Yes.
Okay,
So
so Julian,
we,
go ahead instead.
And yeah, it's great. So much information there about the emancipation and all of that. Thinking about natural law, it's in general, we just graduated recently. Natural law is denied, but it's also pigeonholed into being some type of religious fundamentalism. It's ignored, and it is demonized from a postmodern, really like demonizing view of God, removing the personal God that we Christians believe in, and all of his majesty that we also believe in. So they only attack the spaghetti monster, basically, and then they ignore the fact that the Aristotle, the Plato, the St. Thomas Aquinas have made these claims that God is the thread holding the existence of reality together, and that they're building everything off of that, and they never confront those things. So the question is, how do we bring God back into the discussion when it comes to natural law, when in all reality, they're making a much more outlandish claim than they realize. And we're talking about the language that's accepted elementary school, middle school, high school, college, and the workplace, that God has been excluded because of this letter that is quoted, separation of church and state. If God's excluded, then we can't have an honest discussion about natural law.
Yeah, no, I think that that's true. I mean, we need to recognize that natural law came from, it does have some secular sources, but, it comes from the Judeo-Christian background. And one does not need to argue for a particular denomination or a sect to argue for God and natural law as a higher source than our rights. Many of the founders were really devout Christians, but others less so. And yet they all agreed on this idea of natural law. And like Jefferson said in the Declaration, it's from nature and nature's God. So I think we should be able to talk about these things in the context, especially of our foundational documents, that they are who we are as Americans, and yet recognizing also that there was sort of this Enlightenment strain, maybe a little bit more secular, but people of faith, but also people of not Judeo-Christian faith, embrace these ideals. And so I think that we should be allowed to discuss these things openly, especially because they're really important to our history and to our civics and to who we are as Americans.
Yeah, how would we recently on a congressman had said, God's will is no concern of this Congress, something similar to that, standing under the inscription "In God We Trust," but right above his head.
Sure.
Realizing that in general, we're not talking about, teachers and professors, just people.
Right.
How do we simply say, make them take the full weight of that concept? Like, do you really want to divorce God from our country, and not just God, like you said, not our personal God, but the idea of God at all?
Right. Yeah. I think he's wrong for a couple of reasons. One is we should be able to talk about our faith in the public square, right? That's just a matter of religious freedom, right? Of religious liberty, of freedom of conscience. The other thing I would say to him is, look, a lot of your constituents would disagree, right? You represent a range of constituents, and you need to listen to the religious constituents as well as the non-religious constituents, and the Black and the white constituents. And you need to think about your constituents writ large. They don't all agree with his secular view of the world. And so I think Congress and our state legislatures and other representative officials should take into account views of Christians and Jews and Muslims and people of all faiths. We have a particular viewpoint that should be heard along with every other viewpoint.
Thank you. There's a lot of things in the article I really appreciated, especially those quotes from the founding fathers. I love the Alexander Hamilton quote. I had never heard it, even though I think I read Farmer Refuted, but for some reason, whatever, I forgot to quote it, and it really is a great quote. I think that the world is more interesting with the concept of natural law, and it also makes a whole lot more sense. So I hope that your work goes heard, and that podcasts like this are listened to and watched. But I do think that without a strong discussion about natural law, I don't know if there's a way to pull to stop the tide towards really like an emancipation from any law. Like the individuals seem to want complete, we're looking at it legislation, like simple things like I brought up before, like what bathroom you can go into. We're looking at right now, people wanting to almost define their reality completely, whether it's their gender, whatever it is. And it's getting harder and harder to have the discussions because we're talking with people almost living in two different worlds. So I think this is, I guess, what we need to do more of.
Yeah, and let me just say in response, we need to all stand up for our beliefs and all see, our contribution is worthy and not try to silence other people and let them have their say in a free and open society where ideas are debated. That's the kind of America I grew up in. Unfortunately, a lot of conversation is being censored, is being shut down, is being labeled as racist or this or that. And really, people should have their say in the public square.
All right, Janine,
Yep.
we'll bottle it up.
Okay. I want to read. We're going to go to Jeanette, and if you have those of you that are with us today on the show, if you have a question, you can type it into. Well, no, you have the chat, Jeanette. Tell us who has a question in the chat, right? And while Jeanette's looking at the people who've written questions in the chat, and you can write questions for us in the chat, I'll read that quote that Jewel was discussing. But Alexander Hamilton said, "The sacred rights of mankind are not to be rummaged for among old parchments or musty records. They are written as with a sunbeam in the whole volume of human nature by the hand of divinity itself, and can never be erased or obscured by mortal power." Mortal power being human beings, And I think that really sums up very well. I'm glad you brought that up, Jewel. That sums up very well. It brings us full circle in today that it's a consistent, divinity is consistent, and it should never be erased by human beings. And I think that's what Julian and Jordan are concerned about, is this going to be erased by human beings? And that, that we're up against that. We're with the loss of freedom of speech and being afraid of being branded. People are getting quiet, and when they get quiet, it's going to be gone. This is how tyranny evolves. I mean, bottom line, and Janelle, the bottom line is the reason we have our founding documents was to prevent tyranny, because the minute you get that mortal power, is that how he puts it? Mortal power. That as soon as you get that mortal power, well then. In tyranny, we lose everything. It's just really kind of I'm with Julian and Jordan. It's a bit of we're all a bit worried about the future of our country at this point. Jeanette, go ahead.
We have a question from Larry Storer. He wants to know, why was Article 5 added then to the Bill of Rights? Pursuant to that, how it relates to natural law? Did the founders Go ahead.
No, it was the Fifth Amendment.
Yes. Why was Article 5 added? Then the Bill of Rights pursuant to that, how it relates to natural law. Did the founders also intend for we the people to petition a third and final way to propose amendments, parts of natural rights law independent of Congress and state legislators?
Right. Well, I think that Article 5 was in terms of the amendment process, is added as a matter of sovereignty, right, and representation, that people through either their Congress or state legislatures or through their state conventions, and there were 4 different paths to get an amendment, were that was an expression of sovereignty and free government. Okay. And with many people saying Congress is corrupt today, I think a lot of people don't necessarily want to go through Congress. But I think that relates to the Bill of Rights too, because the Bill of Rights is an expression of protecting those rights that we have, both in nature and in civil society, and that government cannot violate. And one of my favorites is the Ninth Amendment, which says just because we've written some down doesn't mean that others are not protected as well, right? It's an expression of that natural right, that natural law understanding of rights and of constitutionalism.
Okay, and then we have a comment from Sanford Thatcher saying that natural law has a heritage based in Western civilization from the Greeks all the way to the present. But now that we live in such a multicultural world where many different cultures contribute from their own belief system, it poses problems for natural law today.
So I disagree with that a little bit, because the whole idea of a natural law is that it's universal, right? And that it applies to all people, and people of different religious faiths can believe in this, that through our human reason, we can discover the common moral laws of the universe. So it's not something that particularizes us or tribalizes us. It's something that is more universal and can be embraced by all. Yes, it's definitely rooted primarily in the Western tradition, but it's not exclusive to the Western tradition.
I think we need to
That's a great
also, we have to confront the truth's either in us or outside of us. So you have to get to make that decision first. If it's out there, then we're just coming to it. If it's in us, well, then I think we pretty much are only going to have problems forever, because it means that it's in 7 billion different opinions or 8 billion different opinions. How many people are on the world now? But if it's outside of us, then it wouldn't matter what culture figured it out. We're just trying to get there.
Right. Natural law supports the idea of that there's an absolute truth outside of us, not relative to the individual, or just kind of do your own thing, man, like they said in the 60s.
Okay. I think that's it for our audience questions today that we'll have time for, because did we want to talk about our book club coming up on April the 22nd?
Well, I think does anybody want to ask another question since we have 2 minutes? Julian, Jorm, Aubrey?
Maybe too long. Well, hey, how about this? Where can normal people study founding fathers and things like natural law? Where's the easy place to start?
Right. It sounds really complicated. It sounds kind of big and scary philosophical topic, but I think the best place to start is with the writings of the founders themselves, or in some biographies, or you can read some of my books, if I can humbly say that. My book on Washington and Hamilton really talks a lot about natural law. There are plenty of great biographies and books on the founding. The writers of the writings of the founders themselves have a lot. They're so easily available online and in bookstores and so forth. And you don't have to read everyone. Just start with 1 or 2. Don't be intimidated by this huge topic, but just start reading about it, and educate yourselves. And I think we all need to do that as Americans. It's really, an educated citizenry is really a responsibility of a free people, and all of the founders believed in that, right? And ignorant people can have their rights taken away very easily.
And I'll close in saying that yes, everybody should check out your wonderful books. So you should give us the title again in just a minute, and your website and everything. But we shouldn't rely on the government to teach our children what's right. And we shouldn't rely on the schools to teach our children what's right. And we shouldn't rely on Netflix to teach our children what's right. You know what I mean about, we just have to step up as parents and grandparents and some really brave teachers that are out there it's within the family nucleus, whether it's whatever nucleus that is, because I am a single mother. It's up to us. Once again, it's funny. We kind of knee jerk into that situation. We knee jerk into that situation. Well, the schools shouldn't be saying this and shouldn't be doing that. Well, they shouldn't. But nevertheless, if we don't have any power over that, that doesn't mean we're powerless, because it means that we still have the freedom to do it within our own home and our own, nucleus in our own district. You know what I mean? It can have a ripple effect out and about, but we should fight for what we believe is right in the school systems and in the country. But when we're raising a rising generation, we should just make sure while we can, because then they hit 21 and they do whatever they want. So anyway, all right, Tony Williams, tell us about your book again and your website. And thank you so much. Wonderful job today. Appreciate you so much.
Thank you. Great questions from the panelists, by the way. These are some really brilliant and bright young people. I look forward to seeing all their great successes in the future. Well, anyway, I've written 6 books. One of them is Washington and Hamilton, The Alliance That Forged America. I think you mentioned it earlier. I also have a biography of Hamilton called Hamilton, an American Biography. My books are on Amazon or other bookstores online. You can find me on social media, on Twitter and Facebook. Would love to continue the conversation with everyone.
Yes. And your new book's going to be out soon. When will the one on the Declaration of Independence?
It's a work in progress. A work in progress. I'm hopefully by next year, end of next year. So we'll see. 2020.
Very good. Very good. Okay. Thank you. And yes, the panel, the co-host Tova and Julian, Jorn and Aubrey, don't they give us hope in the future of the country? Yes. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Julian, Jorn. Thank you, Aubrey.
Thank
you,
you.
Jeanette. Thank you, Tony. And next
thanks.
week we're
Happy
gonna
Easter.
Yes.
I just said Happy Easter, everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard. I hope I didn't step over that, but thank you, Julian, Jordan. And so next week we're continuing our natural law series with a special guest, and we are going to talk about how natural law. We talked about Aristotle and God and the founding fathers. So we're really going to focus more on kind of where the conversation evolved today about why natural law is important today, and to really make this thing that's a bit obscure very specific. So join us next week again. And Jeanette, do you want to go out with a book club mention?
Yes, Thursday, April 22nd at 7 p.m. Eastern, Written on the Heart, The Case for Natural Law by Professor Bujewski. If you haven't read the book, that's okay. Come along with us. We'll be reading parts of it and discussing it. And you can get that wherever you buy your books. So we hope to see you April 22nd.
It really breaks down April 22nd, and it breaks down the Thomas Aquinas, and it's really fun. Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, Tony.
Bye.
Tony Williams. Bye-bye.